Once upon a time, in a quiet village nestled between rolling hills and a winding river, there lived an old man named Elias. He was known throughout the village not for his wealth or strength, but for something far more powerful: his peace. Elias lived alone in a small wooden cottage at the edge of the village. His garden always bloomed. Birds gathered near his window, and children often peeked in to see what he was doing. He was gentle, soft-spoken, and always carried a warm smile. Villagers would say, you could talk to Elias for 5 minutes and feel like the world just got a little lighter. One afternoon, a troubled young woman named Lila came to visit him. Her eyes were tired, her shoulders slumped, and her voice shaky. "Elias," she said, "how do you do it? You've lived so long, and I've never once seen you angry or upset. Don't you ever feel overwhelmed? Don't things ever break you down?" Elias looked at her kindly and invited her to sit beneath the large fig tree beside his house. "My dear," he said gently, "of course I felt pain. I've known loss, fear, and loneliness. But what I've learned over the years is this: peace is not the absence of problems. It's the presence of perspective." Lila tilted her head, puzzled. "What do you mean?" Elias looked out toward the mountains and began to share a story. "When I was young, I had everything I thought I needed: a wife I adored, 2 bright sons, and a small farm we built with our own hands. We didn't have much money, but we laughed a lot. Every day felt like a blessing." His voice softened. "But one year, a great storm came. It destroyed half our crops. Then came a sickness, and we lost our youngest son. He was only 9. My wife fell into a sadness so deep, I almost lost her too." Lila lowered her gaze, feeling the weight of his words. "I was angry," Elias continued, "at the sky, at fate, even at myself. I asked, why us? Why now? For a long time, I let that anger rule my days. But one morning, while watching the sunrise, I noticed something. The birds still sang. The dew still sparkled on the grass. Life was still happening, even in my pain." He paused for a moment, letting that thought settle. "I realized then that life would never stop throwing storms. But I didn't have to drown in every one of them. That morning, I made a choice. I would no longer let sorrow decide how I lived. I would honor my son by living fully, not by shrinking away." Lila blinked away tears. "But how? How do you live with loss and still smile?" Elias smiled gently. "By shifting what I look for. You see, we train our eyes to notice pain, but we can also train them to notice beauty. A blooming flower, a kind word, the warmth of tea in the morning. I began collecting these small joys like stones in my pocket. Over time, they grew heavier than my grief." "But what about when something terrible happens?" she asked. "Like losing someone again or falling ill. How you stay strong?" Elias leaned forward, his voice calm. "My strength doesn't come from avoiding sadness. It comes from remembering that I survived every hard day before this one. Pain visits, but it doesn't get to unpack its bags and live in me. When sorrow knocks, I let it in, sit with it, then kindly show it the door." He looked up at the branches above them, dancing in the breeze. "I also learned something else," he said. "Every morning when I wake up, I ask myself, what's still good? Even if everything feels broken, there is always something. Maybe it's the sound of the wind or the smell of fresh bread. Sometimes it's just the fact that I'm still breathing." Lila wiped her eyes and whispered, "So it's a choice?" Elias nodded. "Exactly. Peace is not something that just appears. It's something you invite, something you create with small decisions, every single day." Lila sat in silence for a while, taking it all in. Then she stood, hugged the old man tightly, and said, "Thank you." That evening, Lila went home and did something she hadn't done in weeks. She lit a candle, opened her window, and simply watched the stars. She noticed how quiet the night was, how peaceful the wind felt on her skin. And in that moment, she felt just a little lighter. Over the weeks and months that followed, more villagers began visiting Elias. Young parents, worried elders, even teenagers unsure of their future. They all came seeking answers and left with something better: perspective Elias never claimed to have all the solutions. He didn't hand out advice like medicine. Instead, he told stories, asked questions, and gently reminded people what they already knew deep down: that life is fragile, precious, and never perfect. But also, that happiness is not a destination. It's a way of seeing. Eventually, the village began to change. People started greeting each other with more warmth. Children spent more time outdoors. Neighbors shared food and laughed more often. And when hardships came, and they always did, the village no longer sank. It stood together, rooted like the old fig tree in Elias's yard. Years later, long after Elias had passed, villagers would still gather under that tree. They would tell stories, share memories, and remind each other the old man's wisdom. And if you listened closely, you could still hear his voice in the wind. Every day, ask yourself what's still good. Because the truth is, peace begins not when life is perfect, but when you choose to see what's still beautiful, even in the midst of pain. That is the secret Elias carried, and that is the gift he left behind.